and on behalf of everybody here at InSum, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this special webinar on Oracle Forms Modernization. Today's presentation is entitled Protect Your Investment by Modernizing Oracle Forms. This session will be presented by Oracle ACE Director and Executive Vice President at InSum, Francis Mignot, as well as Oracle ACE and Director of Business Development, Monty Latiolet. My name is Mark Ruel, and I'll be your moderator today. Just a few notes before we begin. Your mics are muted, and we'll be taking questions in the question panel. And so we'll ask you to write out your questions as they come to you, but please note that we'll be fielding them at the end of the presentation during question period, which should be in about 50 minutes or so. Now, because we've got a jam-packed, content-filled hour, including our Q&A, there's a good possibility we might go over the 1 hour mark on this webinar, and we certainly hope you can stay on with us past the hour. But don't worry if you can't, because this session is actually being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you directly by email. And now, to move things along quickly, let's first hear from Oracle ACE, Monty Latiolet.
Thank you, Mark. I am Monty Latiolet, and I work in business development for InSum. There are my stats. Been doing this a long time. And looking at the list of signups for this webinar, I do see a lot of familiar names from my time at ODTUG and from the various conferences we're invited to speak. Let's briefly touch on InSum for a moment. We are an Oracle consultancy, and we specialize in custom application development and consulting services for both public and private sector. We work in finance, education, logistics, as well as travel and leisure. We maintain a large stable of experts, including an Oracle Groundbreaker Ambassador in the form of Martin D'Souza, several Oracle ACEs, Oracle ACE Directors, and ACE Associates, and a multitude of certified Oracle Apex developers on staff. Now, we're probably best known for being the world's leading Apex consultancy, Oracle Application Express, but the genesis of this webinar is that we're continually approached by existing Oracle Forms customers that are looking for a way forward. You know, they want to know how can they expand the feature set and at the same time best utilize the existing code and their existing staff. Well, we're going to answer that question over the next 45 minutes or so. With that, I'd like to now introduce my good friend and associate, Francis Mignot.
All right, thank you very much, Monty. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar. My name is Francis Mignot. I'm an Oracle ACE Director. I am an Executive VP for Technologies and Innovation at InSum. I have more than 30 years of experience with the Oracle database, and I did start my career as a developer with Oracle Forms a long time ago in 1986, Forms 2.3 actually. Co-authored 2 books, and my latest one is about Oracle Apex administration for DBAs. And you can follow me on Twitter using my Twitter handle mentioned on that slide here. So the agenda for today. First, we'll talk about Oracle Forms, briefly explaining its strengths and weaknesses. Then I will explain what Apex is and how it compares with Oracle Forms. After, we'll have a look at the different options for modernizing Oracle Forms, and I'll show you how we approach Forms modernization projects at InSum. And then Monty will talk about some use cases we did at InSum, some projects we did, and we'll end the webinar with Q&A. Now, before we start, let's do a quick poll and get your input here. We would like to do a quick poll so that we get a feel of your challenges with Oracle Forms. Mark, can you please start the poll? So please take a few moments to answer this poll. Once you've answered, don't forget to click the submit button at the bottom there. Otherwise, your answers will not be registered. And we'll show the results in a few seconds. So the question is, what are your biggest challenges with Forms applications today? Is it adding new business functions that requires web technologies? Is it providing better user experience, external access that is required maybe for partners or customers? Is it the need for mobile applications, or maybe difficulty in hiring, retaining your forms developers? Or you can select one or many options, by the way. So I'll give you a few seconds just to cast in your poll.
Yep, just a few more responses to collect here.
And you'll see we'll go over most of those points, of course, after, but we are interested in your input. Let's see what kind
Okay.
of audience. All right, so
Full
we'll look
now.
at the results. All right, quite interesting. So most of the people is for the user experience, and the second place is about adding new business functions. So mainly going forward with Oracle Forms. But we do see that most of those points have been, checked by some of you. All right, we can close the poll. So that was very interesting. Let's start with a look at Oracle Forms strengths and weaknesses. Well, Oracle Form does have some strengths, right? It's been there for more than 30 years, so it's been used and proven over the years. It's a stable product. It's still supported by Oracle. Actually, there's even a new version that just came out last September, the 12.14. It's mainly used for back office application. It is robust and reliable. And once your users are trained on it, it can be very productive for data entry purposes. But if we look at the weaknesses, well, due to its age, it can be complex to maintain, meaning that managing deployment might not be that efficient, and it can add time to DevOps operations. It's obviously not a real web framework, as we've seen in the poll, and so it makes it difficult to integrate and interact with other web frameworks or to add those new web technologies. It's not really made for mobile applications. One of the big points, I think, is navigation. So navigation in Forms application uses its own proprietary approach. For example, the end user need to understand the enter query, execute query, as well as what is a commit, the next block, previous block. Even in some cases, doing cut and paste is complicated in Forms. And nowadays, new users are surrounded by web-based navigation in their daily lives, like online banking and other things like that. Forms, in comparison, is non-intuitive from the get-go. And lastly, but not least, finding trained resources is harder with Forms, and new grads that are usually not trained on that technology. Existing Forms professional are either close to retirement or are switching to newer web technologies. Now let's have a look at Oracle Application Express, especially if you're new to Apex. So what is Apex? Apex is a rapid application development tool, a RAD tool, commonly called now low-code tool. It's fully supported by Oracle. It's included with your database licenses. So that means it's free. It's free if you have valid database licenses. It comes with the database. It runs on premise or on the cloud. So it's cloud ready. And it's also now part of the new Oracle Autonomous Database. So it is really central to Oracle business strategy. It is made with a combination of the Oracle database, of course, but also with a layer of web technologies, HTML, JavaScript, CSS. So it is firmly rooted in web technologies. And all you need is a web browser to develop and run your applications. Not only is it a RAD local tool, but every components and parts of the application that you build with the tools can be customized. So it is possible to create very complex application by coding advanced functionality in PL, SQL, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is good for low-code applications, but it is also designed for enterprise-level applications in full control. And it is scalable because it leverages the Oracle database engine. There are different use cases for using Apex, and it can be used for departmental, opportunistic applications and self-service web apps, for example, but also for extending enterprise applications like major ERPs, for example, eBusiness Suite, Fusion, and the others. And of course, for Oracle Forms applications, and that's where Forms actually stands. It's also often used for migrating and centralizing application and their data in the Oracle database for for example, Excel spreadsheets or Microsoft or any other legacy systems. So it's good for many things, but we see that there's a good place for it for extending enterprise application solutions. Apex is database centric, so everything is in the database. It's SQL and PL SQL based. You can declaratively create desktop and mobile web applications using responsive design. It's mainly used to visualize and maintain database data, pretty much as Oracle Forms is. So it's very close in that sense to Oracle Forms. And you can leverage SQL and database capabilities, which again makes it very easy for an Oracle Forms developer to use and start with. Some distinguishing characteristics. Development is 100% browser-based. Nothing needs to be installed on the client for the developers and for the end users. This is a big advantage over Oracle Forms. It means that if upgrades of Apex is required or of your application, you upgrade at one place and everyone gets the upgrade instantaneously. So there's no code generation. Everything is dynamic. That makes deployment and prototyping and development very easy. Actually, this is perfect tool for agile development projects. Generating and running application is very fast because data and the application are both in the database. There are no back and forth between the application server and the database server. If we look a bit closer at the architecture, you'll see that there are three major pieces: the client, which is the browser, the middle tier, and the database tier. The browser is actually the client that will call the web tier for the database connection, and the Apex engine will render the page. On the web tier in the middle, all you need is Oracle REST Data Services, or RDS. This is a Java component that can be deployed on an Apache server or a WebLogic server. It's very small, very lightweight, and as mentioned, applications are not running on that tier, but they are running in the database tier. The database tier contains your schemas, as Oracle Forms does, including the Apex engine that has the metadata that stores the application definitions. So the way it really works, a request is made by the browser towards, which goes to the Oracle database, and then the Apex engine generates the page based on the metadata, the application definition, and the data of your schema. It renders what it needs to render, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, sends that back to Words, that goes back to your browser. So that's the way Apex works. If we look at Oracle, Apex, and Forms similarities, it's quite interesting. First of all, they're very close one to another. Both are 100% Oracle. That goes without saying, but even then, I think that's a big advantage. If you're trying to modernize Oracle Forms, you're kind of staying in the same structure, same infrastructure, same approach, same company. They're both are declarative platforms. So Oracle Forms, we used to call it 4GL. Oracle Apex, we called low code, but at the end, they're both declarative platform. They both have a procedural programming approach, meaning this is not object-oriented. So it's easy for a forms developer to quickly be efficient with Apex. It's the same world, same way of working, same way of developing, same approach. You base your forms on a table, a view, and so on and so forth. Business logic is implemented in the database. So as you know, it's better to put the business logic in the database as much as possible. This is very good for and makes maintenance very easy, but also for performance issues and deployment, that makes everything way easier and faster. They both fully utilizes the database features. And I would even say that in some cases, Apex can leverage them a bit more since it's running in the database. And of course, both are PL SQL and SQL based. Again, that makes it very easy for forms developers to quickly get up to speed with Apex, and they'll feel like at home. Now let's look at the differences. Well, in Oracle Forms, you need to generate executable files, and in Apex, it's all dynamic metadata based. So the deployment of an Apex app is very easy. You just have a link to it, an URL, and then you get access to your page. As for Forms, you need to deploy those FMBs, FMX, and FM. Whatever. You need a Java-based client to run Oracle Forms, and there's different ways now. The browser is embedded into the Oracle Form runtime. You have Java Web Start and all those things. On the Oracle Apex side, all you need is a web browser to run your applications. Forms requires a WebLogic Forms server, and on the Oracle Apex side, it's again all HTML, CSS, JavaScript based. And Forms is not really suited for mobile devices, as Oracle Apex is fully mobile, responsive, out of the box. On top of it, recently Apex was in the news. It was recognized as a leading low-code application development platform by no other than Gartner. It obtained an overall rating of 4.7 out of 5, and that's reviewed by customers. Let's look at some quotes from clients that participated in the Gartner survey. And I think what needs to be seen here is that you see flexible and well-structured framework, outstanding features set, ideal tool for migrating forms and data-centric applications. And that's from Gartner. Now, did I mention that all of this is free? Even ORDS is free. So it's a free stack. It's all available right now on apexoracle.com or on your cloud services. But what you need to keep in mind or note here is that if you have Oracle Forms, you have Oracle Apex. So that means if you have an Oracle database and you're running Oracle Forms today, you can start to use Apex today. You have Oracle Apex. So that's it for the Apex overview. Hopefully this got your attention. And if you need a demo of Apex or more details, you can check out our YouTube videos, or you can contact us. We'll be more than happy to go deeper on the Apex side and do a demo. Now, we cannot talk about modernizing forms without briefly touching on the different technological choices that are out there. So we've designed a matrix that compares different technologies that can be used to modernize Oracle Forms. If we take in account the ease of transition from Oracle Forms to a new technology versus the capacity of implementing new modern web functionalities, we can position those technologies in this matrix. So the first choice would be the basic choice to just upgrade forms. So of course, going from forms to forms, meaning you just upgrade forms to the latest release, this is an easy solution, but you will obviously not get to the new web functionalities here, as mentioned before. If we look at .NET, Java, ADF, VBCS, and other web technology based on JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, well, we know that this is going to be a complex project to modernize your Oracle Forms. One of the main reasons for that is that you will need to rewrite everything from scratch, install new hardware and software, be trained on them, and maintain this in the future and the whole thing. So that's why we've put them there. So you get the nice functionalities, but the ease of transition can be difficult. But if we modernize using Apex, you kind of get best of both worlds. Then we can easily reuse and leverage database objects already created in forms, and then we get access declaratively to those nice web functionalities. That's without saying that your actual IT resources will be quickly efficient with Apex. So over the year, you've made a lot of investments in Oracle in your forms environment. You've built a stable data model that's been proven over the years. You've created business logics in PL SQL packages or just in PL SQL. You have code that's been built in Oracle. It's probably in the database, it's probably in forms, but still you have built those transaction business logic. You have trained resources with Oracle already. They're already trained. They already know how to write good SQL, what's database, tables, views, and whatnot. You also have a robust database technology, which is Oracle. It's known for that. It's including, scalability, high performance, maybe backups, or maybe high availability. All of those things is already there. So why start from scratch when you can leverage your existing investment in Oracle? Okay, now let's have a look at the different options that you have for modernizing Oracle Forms with Oracle Apex. We call this the Forms to Apex modernization spectrum. There are basically 4 ways to modernize Oracle Forms to Apex that we know of. Here is the Forms to Apex spectrum showing those 4 available options, and is to show that it's possible to select a combination of those options. Let me explain. Of course, the first option is the do nothing option, meaning status quo. Live with your existing version of Forms, do nothing, fingers crossed, and hope everything's going to go fine. But if you're here and listening, and based on the survey that you filled up when you registered, I don't think that's something you're considering. But it's still one option at the beginning of the spectrum. One other option is to upgrade to the latest version of Forms. So as mentioned before, Forms just released a new version. There'll be a new one coming out, and there's new features slowly being added to the product. That's perfectly fine. Frankly, this is something we often recommend to our clients. Staying supported and at the most recent level of Forms will at least avoid any major problems or support issues. We have partners and have the expertise for those Forms to Forms upgrade projects, so we can definitely help you out with that. Sometimes it's preferable to upgrade Forms just to ease the integration of Apex using our blended solution that I'll cover in a second. Now let's go straight to the end of the spectrum and talk about the forms to Apex conversion. So this is actually the big bang approach that we call. So in some cases, it's required to take this approach and convert everything in one project. Mostly in the industry, the recommendation is to convert all of your forms in one shot. That's usually the only way when you're going to other solutions like .NET, Java, IDF, and BBCS. You don't have really the choice because you need to rewrite everything going to those newer technologies or different technologies. And there's no silver bullet that exists out there for converting everything. Although in some cases that approach do work with Apex. If, for example, you have a little amount of forms or for other internal reasons, we know that those projects can be very complex and time-consuming and expensive. So we believe there's another better solution. It's the blended solution. That means you can have an hybrid approach mixing Oracle Forms with Oracle Apex applications. You can either run them at the same time in the same database, or you can even go further and implement single sign-on in between both of them and leverage existing forms and Oracle database security. With Oracle Apex and Oracle Forms, you can run both technology on the same database using the same stored objects with the same data model. See? So you can leverage a lot of what you have already right now. And again, if you have Oracle Forms, you do have Oracle Apex. We think that avoiding the big bang approach will bring you multiple advantages. First, no need to spend tons of dollars and hours on those projects. It's less impacting to the business since you can do a phase approach. So you can modernize in phases. It gives a smooth learning curve and integration for users, for your end users, and for your IT staff. So developers, DBAs, analysts, and everybody in IT can slowly learn about Apex and use it. You can start with a small module, for example, and then expand to the bigger, more complex one as you feel more comfortable. It's going to give you a quick return on investment and a quick improvement to your business functions. The blended solution approach has been used for many, many years by extending eBusiness Suite, actually. That's something we do regularly, and we do a lot. EBS, or eBusiness Suite, is essentially a set of Java and Forms application. So it's basically a Forms system. And we've proven this approach on multitude projects, and many companies are currently running this in production. This is beneficial for them for many reasons. Well, first, it simplifies the deployment and upgrades of the core Forms EBS application. It allows new functionalities that were not possible before, and it brings new modern interfaces. So you see, Apex and Forms can live together in harmony. If I go a bit more detail, a bit more technical, you'll see it's not that complicated. So here's how we integrate Apex and EBS. You can see that the application server running ORDS here at the bottom is actually sitting beside the actual EBS application server. So the top line is the EBS install, and we come in and we just beside the actual application server for eBusiness Suite, we install Oracle REST Data Services. Remember that, that's the piece we need for on the web tier for Apex. And then we install the Apex engine and the production database. So it has access to all your database objects, and in that case for EBS, all the EBS objects. Well, why not do the same with Oracle Forms and any other Oracle Forms installations? So what we do, again, is the same. We install ORDS just beside our application server, and it can run either on a WebLogic server, it could be on the same one, or it could be on an Apache server. Then we install the free Oracle Apex engine in the database, pretty much the same as I just showed with Oracle eBusiness Suite, and that's it. It is not intrusive in the existing Forms install, and you can start building web application on your Oracle Forms application data. Quite simple, quite easy. And again, if you have Oracle Forms, then you're allowed to use Oracle Apex and install it and run it. All right. Now let's have a look at the Oracle Forms little brother, Oracle Reports, as I know that some of you are still using Oracle Reports. There are options on that side too. As you may know, Oracle Reports is officially in its terminal release at 12.2.130. Premier support will end this year in October, and extended support will end in 3 years in October. So there's no functional enhancement for Oracle Reports. It is now time to look at converting your Oracle Reports to something else. So the official path is BI Publisher. But when you have an Oracle Apex environment, there are other choices that are available. You can use third parties like Apex Office Print, or commonly called AOP, or you can use also another third party called PL/PDF that generates PDF based on PL SQL. AOP is a bit more tightly integrated with Apex, and it's similar to BI Publisher in its approach by using Word templates. It's also with AOP possible to print interactive reports in an automated fashion. There's also using Apex interactive reports and interactive grids where you can replace some of your Oracle reports and give dynamic access to your data to your end users. They'll be able to create their own reports and charts and even save and share them with others in the enterprise. And there are other reporting tools that can be integrated with Oracle Apex. I'm not going to go in details, but there's, for example, the Jasper reports, Bird Crystal reports, and so on and so forth. Now we have covered Oracle Forms. We have talked about reports and Apex, and we've seen different options for modernizing, going from full conversions to a blended approach in our spectrum. But let's see how we undertake modernization projects at InSum. Let's look at the InSum approach. In every Forms modernization projects, we have to do the following 3 steps. And that's basic, right? We need to do the functional analysis or look at the business functions, understand them, look at the data model, the requirements of the application. And at this moment, we have to make sure really nothing falls into the cracks. Second, we need to do the technical analysis that I call. So that means looking at the security, infrastructure, navigation, UX, UI, extracting logic from existing forms, existing reports. That's a very long process. Sometimes forms have been there for a long time. Sometimes knowledge has been lost over the years. That's a very complicated, very long, complex step here. And finally is the step to create the Apex applications. And just take a minute here. Many try to automate this step, thinking that that will speed up the project of modernizing your Oracle Forms. But when you think about it, Oracle Apex is a rapid application development tool. That means that the Oracle Apex team is working day in, day out to improve the speed of development, making it crazy fast and create secured and scalable applications. And trying to call Apex APIs is kind of a waste of time, if you ask me. We have seen that all over the last 16 years. The Apex team has released at least one new Apex version, if not more, every year. All with major improvement in speed of development and deployment. So what you really need on the Apex side to speed up the Apex creation application is experience and expertise, maybe some tooling, methodologies, best practices. You want to make sure that you start on the right foot, and what you build will be easily maintained and will grow over time and will be able to be maintainable over a long period of time. So at InSum, we have developed a specific Oracle Forms to Apex approach that combines Apex expertise with Oracle Forms expertise and a methodology that makes every Forms modernization a success. Let's look at the effort for a manual Forms modernization. If we look at that, let's say for one Forms, and those three steps I just talked about, functional analysis or business analysis, the technical analysis of looking at all of your forms, and creating the Apex application. We see that, the first step, the green part, is not what takes the most time. It's mainly the technical analysis that's long, cumbersome, and takes a long time. So we evaluate about, and that again is just to show my point, but let's say an average 11% of your time for one form will be about 11% in the functional analysis, 56% in technical analysis, and 33% in creating your Apex applications. If we say, or for example, that we define that one form would take 72 hours to modernize, that would be the equivalent of spending 8 hours in analyzing the business, 40 hours and looking at the forms and everything, and 24 hours in creating the Apex application. So that's an estimate. Don't take this for granted. Don't go out and multiply the number of forms, but let's say that just for argument's sake, that we have 400 forms. Well, just right there, that makes it close to 29,000 hours. Obviously, it's not that simple. And those numbers are just, again, to demonstrate that when it comes to manual modernization, the numbers can ramp up quite quickly. So be reassured, we have what it takes to make it easier and faster, not only by using taking the blended approach that I explained earlier on, but also because we have developed a methodology and some tools to automate the analysis, to automate that big part. Let's have a look at the methodology first, and then I'll show you the tool that we have that we use to help on that side of things. So for every modernization projects, this is our methodology. We do the following phases. The first phase is our planning phase. So planning phase is really estimated the effort, looking at the project, preparing everything, putting the team in place. So it's really planning the whole project. Do you want to go blended solution? You need to upgrade your forms to forms. Do you want a mix? Do you want a full conversion? How many forms do you have? So on and so forth. Then once everything's defined and we've automated the estimation, we did the estimation, and for that part, we use what we call our tool called Informs. And again, I'll get that to that in a second. Once that's done, we do a kickoff, and then we set the basis or the base of your application. So we define the infrastructure, if there's any specificity as far as security is concerned, about the design, and other things like that. Once the base or the foundation has been defined, then we get into our agile development cycle. So we do analysis and design, development and test and QA, sprints, using sprints, maybe a week, two week sprints, 3 week sprint, depending again on the planning phase of what we've defined. We do scrums and cards, maybe use Jira. And at the end of the sprints, we get production ready applications. So they're fully functional and really ready to be deployed. And then we get into the deployment phase. So again, it depends. Maybe you want to do that as the sprints ends, or maybe you want to bundle them. There's different way to go. That really depends on your own requirement. That's our methodology and that's our approach. Now, for the first part, the evaluation phase, like I mentioned, we use a tool that we've built called Informs. So the way Informs work, and I'll have a quick demo on that, but just to explain, we take the source of your forms, MMBs, OLB, and maybe RDF, put them in an XML format. We load that into our own Informs database, and then we parse the information. So we look at the content of that XML, we put that in our own internal metadata. Then we inspect that, and then we look at everything, evaluates the different components, look if there's anything that is applicable for conversion or not, and then we come up with some scoring. And the score will give us an estimate on how long it's going to take, the complexity of each and every one of the forms, and then that's going to help us, be able to see what needs to be done and how long it's going to take. If we look at reports, it's a bit the same approach. We take reports, generate an XML files, put that in our Informs migrator tool, and then we are able to generate a first pass at either AOP or PLPDF. Or we generate a report center that manage interactive reports and call the newly created reports and whatever technology. And of course, if you want to use other technologies, we can help you out, manually convert those reports to other technologies that we've mentioned before. All right, so let me do a quick demo of Informs just to show you what it's like, what it does, and how it works. So our Informs tool that we use with all of our modernization projects is built with Apex, by the way. What you see here is actually an Apex application. And we use this tool to accelerate and facilitate the modernization process, as I just mentioned. So the first step is to upload the FMX, either one by one, or you'll see we can use a zip file. So I'll go and load modules and browse and then upload my FMX. It could be hundreds of forms, it could be zipped, it could be thousands of forms. And we see the 4 files selected, but actually it's 12 forms that I'm uploading. Then we'll run the process of parsing, inspecting, and scoring that I just explained, and you'll see that runs somewhat fast and quick. So parsing is running, and it refreshes automatically. We see parsing is done, and then inspection is done, and scoring is almost done. Now, let's look at the first form, A001. You see the results of the scoring there, and I'll get to that in a moment. And the details of the forms components, all that without having to open and go into Oracle Forms. So we see right away components that will not be taken in account. For example, if there's no code to convert, this one is a null, right? So no need to convert that. But we can also see the code right here in Inform and start analyzing and looking and working on our forms. No need to go back and forth between Forms and Apex. We look at the evaluation or the scoring part. We basically have 3 scenarios. So those 3 scenarios here. The first one of 280 hours, and that's an example again of those 12 forms, right? So this estimate gave us 280 hours and different levels of complexity of our forms. So I have 5 level 1s and 1 level 4, for example. So that is, first scenario is like I would have to convert everything manually. The second one, the 246 hours, is excluding all the things that do not need to be converted, like dead code, designer code. So if your forms were generated by Oracle Designer, that generates a lot of code. So we take that into account. Navigation triggers, they don't need to be converted. There's no navigation triggers in Apex. or any other non-applicable components. And the third scenario there, last one in 215 hours, is taking into account not only the things that are not applicable, but also redundancy in between forms. So that means if I have a piece of code in one form that's used over 12 other forms, I need to convert it once, not 12 times, so there's a gain of time. So overall, this is giving us a gain of about 25% in our conversion effort just by running that and then looking at this. All right, so now let's select the best scenario, the last one that includes everything. And then look at the effort. And we can break the effort by tasks. So that means, for example, we have development efforts, analysis efforts, QA, and on top of it, we can customize this to take into account other things like DBA time, UA, UX, security, and the others. So if we look at the details, we see that all the forms are categorized within about 20 levels of complexities. So it's very detailed and precise. We get a score and an evaluation of hours for every single forms. Now I'll go in the non-applicable components and look at what that is. So we can investigate what has been identified as navigation code, for example. Look at this key down trigger. I can, again, have a look at the detail of the code of that key down. I see it's just a down, no need to convert that. So that's not applicable. We can also look at dead code, meaning code that is there but is not called from anywhere. And again, the tool allows you to go in, check this out, make sure it's really the case, and then investigate on this. And we can look at common redundant code that is used in multiple forms. So for example, you see here the total project file, so the 12 forms. I see that if I look at the key delrec, there's 11 times, this key delrec is called 11 times exact same code in 11 different forms. So if I go in, I see all the forms using this exact same key delrec. So if we inspect A001, we look and see the code. And using that, we can avoid coding the same things multiple times and maybe leverage database stored procedures and so on and so forth. So you see the code of that key delrec. If I go into another forms that's been analyzed by the informs, F1001, and you'll see the exact same key delrec just to prove that it's the exact same thing. So that's our informs. So once everything, and that concludes my demo of our informs. So once everything is analyzed and looked at and defined, and then our cards are built, we can start building our Apex app. Again, as a RAD tool, we build it very rapidly, and we can use our agile methodology, and with adding our special sauce and expertise to the mix, then we get successful forms to Apex modernization. So I hope that was interesting for you, that you learned something. Now that concludes my piece of the presentation. I'll pass it on to you, Monty.
All right, well, thank you very much, Francis. Well done, my friend. And I learned something every time I go through these demos with you. Okay, well, it should be clear now that we know what we're doing and we've done it before. We're credentialed. And this slide identifies a few of the forms modernization projects we've worked on or are working on. Overall, we're talking hundreds of projects involving thousands of forms and thousands of reports with companies large and small, and on projects large and small. Now, I want to bring up a few of maybe the flagship form migrations and form modernizations we worked on at InSum. The first involves a project I worked on myself with Carnival Cruise Lines. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of legacy forms that we converted, both back office applications as well as some customer facing features. For example, if you've been on a cruise before, one of the very popular things to do are these shore excursions. And we were able to convert all of those to Application Express, including things like payment processing. Another project we worked on involved the Canadian Space Agency. I'd go into details, but it's probably over your head. You see what I did there? Seriously, a very successful project with more than 100 forms completed on time and on budget, just the way we like it. And lastly, if you're like me and you like to play the ponies, then you'll find this to be an interesting project. For the Texas Racing Commission, we modernized their veterinary applications, and this system tracks horses' health, when certain vaccinations have been performed, and by whom, which vaccinations are upcoming. Lots of record keeping around that highly regulated sport, and we were able to really provide a much better experience there for the application users. Now the conference season is underway, and experts such as Francis and others that here at InSum are always in high demand at the various venues. So if you're planning on attending one of these conferences, let us know. We'd love to meet you there and chat some Apex. Upcoming is the Collaborate Conference, which is the third week in April. Francis and I are going to be speaking on this very subject. Also, if you're planning on attending ODTUG K-Scope, this year's in Boston, if you would use registration code INS20, we'll save you $100 off your registration fee. So please do so. Otherwise, I encourage you to visit insum.ca, as well as our YouTube channel, where we have a complete library of how-to videos. We actually have a landing page on our website specifically related to forms and forms migrations and modernizations. So, returning to the question Francis first posed, and that is, why start from scratch with new technology when you can use a large percentage of your existing investment? The answer is you shouldn't. Modernizing your forms with Application Express represents the most cost-effective method going forward, and to take you where you are today to where you want to be. Okay, we'd like to thank you for your attendance today, and to show our appreciation, we'd like to offer each and every one of you currently running Oracle Forms a free 30-minute consultation with myself and one of our InSum team members, where we can provide a custom blueprint for your way forward. We'll be emailing you shortly, so you can pick out your time that works best for you. Also on that email, I'll have my full contact information should you have an immediate need you'd like to discuss. All right, Mark, I'll kick it back to you. Do we have any questions from our audience?
Sure, Monty, and I'd like to encourage everyone who is on the call right now to please get in all your questions as we are now in the question period. I'll put the first question I have here from a few people actually. How and where do we get informs?
That's actually a good question. No, I'm kidding, but Informs is a tool that we use that is bundled with our expertise and services. So that's a tool that we use for your projects. So if you want to know more, you can leverage this 30-minute free consultation, and we can show you how it works and maybe apply a couple of your forms on it, and then go over it and show you what it is. But that's essentially a tool. That's what we call our accelerators. So you know, at InSum, we're a dedicated Apex company, and we're very niche. That's Apex is everything we do, and we have a department of innovation that we call the InSum Labs. And in that lab, we build different tools. So we have a tool, for example, to speed up Discover migration reports, as explained, and Inform is one of those accelerators that we use to help our clients speed up their migrations or modernization, should I say, of your forms.
Okay. And here's another question we have. What are the challenges of the migration?
Well, I would say that one of the challenges is that all forms aren't created equal. You've got some forms that are very simple, maybe just involving some reference tables, and then you've got some other forms on the other end of the spectrum that are very complex. The good thing about our tool is that it allows us to look around the corner down the street to know what we're getting into. You know, and by the way of the scoring, we're just not, we don't get into a situation where we're surprised at the complexity, because before we even set foot on the ground, we already know that we've done this automated analysis. We know what we're getting into. But that's really the challenge, is when you tend to kind of to lump all forms together, because these forms vary greatly in their complexity. The example that Francis gave, how he got to 28,000 hours, you know, that's the thing to do is as Francis mentioned, you don't just take the form and multiply it times a level of effort. These things are very unique in FMBs, and they should not be treated altogether. They should be looked at independently, and we do so in an automated fashion.
So to me, the big challenge is really the unicity or the differences between each and every single forms applications. What I mean by that, I've talked a bit about e-business suite extensions. The good thing about EBS, even though it's a forms application, we know what EBS is, what release we're running, and then we can start extending it. So we know, you know, what features need to be extended or changed or modified. As for a forms application, well, it's custom to every single person or every single company. As Monty just mentioned, it's different from one to the other. So the big challenge is to really undertake the project and moving forward. So I bet everyone on the call right now are wondering how to, you know, go forward with your Oracle Forms. So what we're saying is that by analyzing your forms, by leveraging our expertise, by really preparing and being organized in your project, and by using Apex, and by using those different options, either the blended options or just upgrading forms. So each and every case, the challenge is to sit down and really look at the project and define what will be the steps and the efforts required. But again, one good thing with Apex is that you'll quickly get to something. So we think that with Apex, you don't need to just start on those big endeavors and then start on those big projects. We can start with Apex. You have Oracle Forms, you have Oracle Apex, install it, start leveraging your data, build a dashboard, for example, on your forms data using the nice charting capabilities of Oracle Apex, and then start with that. And then as you go, then maybe you'll add something else. You'll add a mobile application, you'll add web services, you'll add other things like a faceted search report. You'll add an interactive report. And as you'll go, you can go, you know, slowly. And as you'll feel more comfortable with Apex, then you'll be able to modernize most of your things in Oracle Forms. And again, if there's parts of the Oracle Forms that are still working fine, don't waste your time on that. Just go straight to the main pain points and try to resolve them. So baby steps, slowly going, moving forward. And Apex is the only technology out there today that will allow you to do such a thing.
I've got another challenge that I thought of as you were speaking, Francis, and that is one of the challenges is you need to make sure that you manage expectations on the users, because some people are going to think that the Apex app is going to look, smell, and taste exactly like the Forms app, and that's not going to be the case. It's going to be adding to the feature set. You know, it's going to be adding the web functionalities that you currently don't see in Forms. So there's going to be some change management that needs to occur with your users. Involve your users. That's very, very important. What people help to create, they help to support. And so getting your users involved is always key. And one other challenge, albeit minor, but forms will allow you to make a lot of OS level commands and stuff like that. We can certainly do that with Apex. It just, it's sometimes a challenge on how we do things at the OS, but we certainly have things in place to accomplish those. Like in forms, you call them host commands. We can certainly do that with Apex. We just need to know up front, so we know what we need to code against. Again, the in forms spots and identifies those kind of integration points.
Okay, so I'm going to skip over a couple of questions that were precise and not quite about forms or reports, and go to this one. But I'll get back to those two questions later. In a hybrid solution, Forms Apex, how do you set an Apex session before jumping from Forms? Is it easy to carry some context in the jump so users don't get frustrated?
All right, so it's we've developed, that's another thing we've developed in our Intum lab, a way of single sign-on between Oracle Forms and Oracle Apex, and that's actually what we leverage for our EBS single sign-on. So you'll need to either build it yourself or leverage, again, our tooling to do so. So our single sign-on starts a session, passing the user and then the context to the Apex app. I know it doesn't really answer the question, but there are ways of doing so. It's not easy, but we've developed the tooling to do so.
Okay, and a related question is, can we integrate Apex on cloud with Azure AD for SSO?
If the question is to use Apex on Azure Cloud, yes, you can. But if you do it on the Oracle Cloud, you'll get better pricing for it, because on the Azure Cloud, you'll need to pay for the Oracle licenses and so on and so forth. As far as single sign-on, I'm not sure if you're talking about a custom single sign-on. Yes, I don't know of any other single sign-on on Azure. So this we would have to take offline and see exactly what that question is or about.
Okay. The next question is, how much challenge is stateful, in parentheses forms, versus stateless, in parentheses Apex, connection to DB when you migrate application?
So that's a great question, and that's something that keeps coming back often, and I don't know why, but people are kind of afraid of moving to a stateless connection from a stateful connection. That means that Oracle Forms, every time you open a session, it opens a connection to the database, and so one connection is equal to one user, or one session is equal to one connection in the database. As for Oracle Apex, is a pool of connection like any modern web framework, and you go in, it requests the page like I showed earlier, and then sends back the web page, and then releases the connection. Well, to me, and then we've been doing Apex development for 16 years now. So we started in 2004, never once had any issues around those type of things. Maybe it'd be around locking or those type of things. Apex has its own locking mechanism. It's I think it's called pessimistic versus optimistic locking. Anyway, if the records have changed between the time you got the page and the time you resubmit the page, you're gonna get an error. But we never ever saw any problems with that. So to us, this is not a challenge. It's just a different way of working. If you have both sessions running at the same time, Apex is going to use it, like I showed, it's going to be sitting beside your Forms web server. So it's going to use a second set of pool of connection and its own things to connect to the database. So you will not get any issues or things like that. So there are ways also when you call an Apex form from a Forms page, to release the locks and things like that. So there are ways of doing so you don't get into any issues. I hope I answered the questions.
Okay. Next question is there a tendency for projects converted to Apex to look like Forms rather than the more modern look of Apex?
So that's also a very good question. We recommend that you do not try to reproduce the exact same thing for many reasons. First of all, like I showed in the differences, there are two different technologies. And second of all, Forms did what it did best in the time. Nowadays, there's new features that you can leverage. There's charts, there's interactive reports, there's tons of new features that you want to give to your end users. And also, end users are now used to the web approach. So they do their online banking, they have an iPhone or they have phones, they have tablets and everything. So why would you stick to the exact same thing? You can leverage the technology. So the answer is when we do a Forms to Apex modernization, we leverage the new functionalities. Now, the challenge here is to manage the change management for your end users. If you have younger people and new person coming on board, that's going to be intuitive to them. But sometimes with your Forms application, like I mentioned, it's used by people that have been there for a long time. They're used, so it's like any new, basically it's like any new project. You want to come in and make sure that you involve your users and modernization of your application, get them part of your sprints, get them involved, and that's going to ease the transition. That being said, in some cases, there are requirements to build the exact same thing, and we've done those type of projects. They're a bit harder to do because, again, they're not the same framework. So you're running in a web browser. As for Forms, you're running in this very restricted, controlled client-server type of environment. So it's not the same. Like on a web browser, the end user can close the browser, back, and go forward or whatever else. So it's very, very different. But it is doable. So we've done it in certain times. And sometimes you can leverage tooling out there that are available. I'm thinking about FOEX, for example, which replicates more closely what Form does. So there are options out there if you have to replicate exactly the same thing. But again, our basic approach of all of the modernization project is to bring new functionality. So we're getting out of the client server approach to a more web approach.
And if we look at the results of the poll that we took at the beginning of this webinar, that was, I think, the #1 response was that they wanted to bring a more modern web experience. We had new features, new feature sets that they were wanting to add to their existing Forms applications, providing a better user experience. Even as something as mundane as closing down the browser window, Apex is going to do things in a responsive manner. You try to do that with Forms, and it doesn't reduce in size, it doesn't grow in size. Once everything is laid in on the canvas, you have what you have. So if you're looking to provide that better user experience, you need to bring in these modern web technologies to do so.
Okay. Another question is, what do you recommend as a replacement for SQL report writer?
Like I mentioned, every reports, and that's using Apex. Our first choice is really AOP. That's not an Oracle tool. There's a cost to it. It's not that expensive. There's even a cloud version. So I have a look at Apex Office Print. Very nice tool, and it's more and more integrated with the Oracle Apex tool. If you want to go the official route, or if you have BI Publisher licenses, I would suggest that you go with BI Publisher. Again, there are other choices like PLPDF, and look at what can be converted or migrated to interactive reports. I think that's that's one of the key features of Oracle Apex is the interactive reports. So you should have a look at that. That usually replaces tons of reports and gives a lot of flexibility to your end users and have access live to their data on the database.
Yeah, I spoke with Oracle Forms PM Mike Ferrante, and he was saying that they do recommend from Oracle's recommendation there is that they go BI Publisher, and if you have a Forms license, then they have you don't have to pay extra for the BI Publisher license. It comes with your Forms license now. But yeah, SQL Report Writer. I think anything you migrate to from that's going to be huge improvement.
The person who also asks, have we ever done an AOP webinar?
They're out there. There's plenty of them out there, and we follow the demand. If you guys are wanting to see webinars on various topics, please get your comments in, and we'll start working on an AOP webinar then. So be as specific as you can.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about those tools, I really recommend that you go to those conferences, specifically Kscope from ODTUG. There's a huge Apex track. I don't know how many sessions there are. There are like 55 sessions around Apex, and there's always sessions around reporting and AOP. So that would be one place to go to and learn about it.
Yeah, and the folks at AOP are most likely going to be in attendance. I mean, I think Dimitri hasn't missed many Kscope conferences, so Jackie's probably going to be there. So you'll be able to ask these AOP questions directly to AOP people.
Okay, our next question is, how is record locking handled in Apex?
So like I explained just before, I never know if it's optimistic or pessimistic. It's a pessimistic approach. So what it does, it puts checksum. It gets the data and then gets the page and then releases the connection. And then when you resubmit the page, it goes back in and then it checks. But if you're within a transaction, so in Apex you can have processes and then have a transaction in there. It's a standard Oracle transaction. It's gonna open the Oracle transaction, do what it needs to do, and do the locking and whatnot. And then once it's committed, then it releases the lock. So it's standard Oracle stuff. It's just that if you're in an Oracle Forms and you open a form or page on a block that's based on a table, then the table is going to be locked until you really commit in the forms. In Apex, it doesn't do so. It's a stateless connection. So a stateless session, it's going to go in, get the page, give it back to you, and release the connection. So there's no locking going on there.
No, everything you just said is spot on, Francis. It's just that actually Oracle Forms uses what's termed pessimistic, and Apex uses what's termed optimistic.
Yeah. You see, I always mix both.
But you explained the rest of it. You nailed it.
I think the important part to remember is that they work a bit differently, but there's no issues into that. You'll never see any issues. I can guarantee on that. It's made for that. And again, Apex is built by the Oracle team. So they're making it, and they're very closely integrated, or very close. They have access to the database guys. And then, so everything is made so it's secured. So there's no danger of, having injections and things like that. It's secured. You cannot go in the schema. Everything's locked. It's very well maintained, and it's performant. So they make it so, make sure that there's no overhead of generating the pages, and the whole locking thing also, it's all handled, and they make sure that it works seamlessly.
Okay. Next question is, it's a bit off topic, but if we have Apex on ATP, can we connect it to an on-prem printer and integrate with it?
You can send to an online printer, yes. We've done so in a couple of projects. The Carnival project was one of them, I remember that. So that is feasible. I know AOP has some features to do so. So yes, the answer is yes, it's possible to straight send things to local printers.
Yeah, you may want to look at Node.js and Electron for some functionality there.
And that's a good point. The Node.js, Electron, and all of those web frameworks, that's another thing that Apex can leverage. Now you're in a world of everything is web, everything is compatible with other web technology. So you open up to all of those new features that you cannot leverage with Oracle Forms.
All right. And the next question is, well, it's actually a comment. It would be interesting to see best developers' practices regarding Apex development INSOM uses in their development.
Well, you know, we have strong opinions when it comes to best practices around Application Express, and we do put a lot of them out on our website, and we're, you know, through outreach like this webinar. I mean, the best way to have access to our methodology is and to the tooling that Francis mentioned is you know, by engaging INSOM and working with us on a project that you have, because that's really the carrot there. You get us, you get this tooling, you get the informs, you get some of the other tools that we've developed in our innovation in our INSOM labs. So whereas not all this is commercially available, it's all 100% available. You know, whenever we're working together on a project.
So I'm gonna, maybe I should not, but I'll say it anyway. We're working on an open source standard for SQL and PL SQL that will be available on Git. We're also and be open sourced, and we're working also on Apex and JavaScript standards. So keep your ears and eyes open, and keep an eye on our website that's coming out soon.
Okay, this pretty well concludes our question period. We don't have any more questions coming in. So if you gentlemen are okay, we'll conclude for today.
Yes.
All right. So got to remind you that for those of you running Oracle Forms applications, again, we encourage you to take advantage of that free 30-minute consultation that, because you were an attendee here, you can get. So we'll make sure that you find value in it, and that no matter where you are in your Forms modernization journey. So you'll be getting this invitation to set a time that's convenient for you shortly after this session has ended. And as I mentioned before, recording this session will be sent to you as soon as possible by email. And finally, on behalf of everyone at INSOM, thank you so much for your time, and we all hope to see you soon. Goodbye.